Thank you. Assemblymember Davies?
Thank you. Senator, thank you so much. You and I have worked together on some very important bills last year and even this year in regards to drug prevention and tools. So when I come to this question and listening to all the, and thank you for everyone on both sides, because again, this is what we're here. We're here to hear your voice, and your voice does matter. Starting out with obviously your bill, it's very fine. I mean, there's basically about 3 paragraphs telling us what's in here, so there's not a lot of details. And here we're, your first paragraph: a minor 12 years of age or older may consent to a vaccine that is approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration and meets the recommendations of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices of the Federal Center for Disease Control and Prevention without the consent of a parent or guardian of the minor. Now, we heard a speaker there talking about how does this bill provide guardrails to protect minors with exceptional needs whose ability to consent might be compromised due to cognitive impairment or intellectual disabilities.
Yeah. And thank you. And we're working on a bill around fentanyl and other drugs now, so I appreciate our collaboration. The analysis does a thorough job talking about the consent issue on pages 9 and 10 of the analysis. And as I mentioned earlier, every healthcare provider, whether you're treating a 12-year-old or a 75-year-old, whether you're vaccinating or providing any other form of healthcare, has a professional and legal responsibility to obtain informed consent. And so if let's say a 13-year-old goes to their pediatrician and says, I want to be vaccinated, and it appears that that 13-year-old is not able to function cognitively, or if a 30-year-old walks in and doesn't appear like they are all there cognitively, that physician has an obligation, or any provider, to determine, can this person provide informed consent? That is a well-established area of the law. There are ethical responsibilities. You can be disciplined or lose your license if you provide health care without informed consent. And if they determine that 13 or 15-year-old or 12 or 17-year-old or 20-year-old cannot provide informed consent, then they can't provide that treatment, including a vaccination, and they would have to go some other route if there were going to be informed consent. So that's clear law, and that would apply here.
Okay, so with that said, you have, obviously there's an array of different type of doctors or practices that could actually administer this vaccine. Are they also then taking that type of education in school, such as a eye doctor? Do they take classes like that to know how to see whether or not this is something that, would be safe mentally?
I think any healthcare provider, whether it's an optometrist or a neurosurgeon or a nurse practitioner, et cetera, they get trained on informed consent, and they have ethical responsibilities, legal responsibilities, to obtain informed consent for any form, whether it is, dilating your pupils if you're an optometrist, or whether it is performing some sort of brain surgery on someone to deal with some sort of brain issue, or administering a vaccine. Whether they're 12 or 75, they have to provide informed consent. Healthcare providers are trained to do that, and they are bound to do that.
So they're trained in mental behavior?
They're trained about obtaining informed consent. That is a pillar of healthcare practice, that you obtain informed consent, and that they're required to do that no matter what kind of healthcare they're providing. And you can get in big trouble if you go around providing healthcare to people who are incapable of providing informed consent.
They still don't have the training, though, as a psychiatrist would have, or a psychologist would have.
Again, there are much more invasive kinds of healthcare for which healthcare providers get informed consent, various kinds of surgery, et cetera. And they're not trained in psychiatry. If you're a neurosurgeon or a heart surgeon or you're an ophthalmologist, you're trained to obtain informed consent, no matter what the age is. And informed consent from teenagers is not a new concept in the law, because we've seen around the country, including California, there's a lot of health care that 12 to 17-year-olds are already allowed to consent to with informed consent, and those healthcare providers have to make that determination.
Over their parents making that determination?
If the teenager has the legal ability to provide informed consent for health care, then the doctor or pharmacist or whoever else has to make that determination.
Okay, so let's go on to the next point is if, God help, some child, and again, let's make sure that because the age of 12 is considered a child, 13 is a teenager. So we're still dealing with children here. If they have an adverse reaction, parents aren't aware of that they had this done, they vaccine, God forbid they die, who's liable for that?
And just to be clear, 12 to 17-year-olds are already able to consent to various vaccines and other forms of health care. So just to be clear, this is not a new thing. If someone, we know that vaccines are overwhelmingly safe and effective. In the rare case where someone has a side effect, they have the ability to make a legal claim under federal law in the vaccine compensation process, and that's been around for decades. And that you are able to do that, including people under the age of 18.
So if something, again, God forbid, a child dies, 12-year-old child or a teenager, 13, the parent then can go and sue that person that gave him that vaccine. And I just want to say this because I've seen a lot of people, and I bring up COVID because really all the witnesses were dealing with COVID that we heard. And that I know a lot of people, believe it or not, that had side effects with taking the vaccination, and they were trying to sue, and they got nothing, and they've been put back and back. So right now, that doesn't seem to be working with this. So I guess there's got to be some type of liability. If all of a sudden I come home and my child, I come home from work 5 hours later, and my child's laying there, and I didn't realize even that they had the vaccination. I call the hospital. They come in, and they're like, well, what's wrong? I don't know. I mean, there's got to be, how is the parent's supposed to know this is happening? Is there a form that once they get it, the child can consent, but then they have to go home and just say, hey, so I got this?
So, as I mentioned before, there is in terms of anyone who is vaccine injured, which is rare, but if it happens, federal law creates a structure for compensation. And so that's how people are compensated for injuries relating to vaccines. And that is in lieu of a regular lawsuit that you would file. You go and you get compensated that way. And that's been the law for many years.
And I get that as well, but again, as we say that happens, I mean, a compensation is nothing when a child could be damaged for the rest of their life or they die. So saying that we do have a compensation, I guess what I'm trying to get here is this is a parental right, a right to know that their child is safe. Why is it that we have them have to write consents if they want to take a field trip? Why is it that they have to have consensual right, if they want to play a sport? But we can go ahead and give a 12-year-old, 13-year-old the right to make this decision. This is not about vaccinations. This is about the rights of parents. I can tell you growing up, and you were saying that these kids are going, listen, my parents won't let me get this vaccination. My parents won't let me get this type of immunity. Growing up, I remember, with living in Wisconsin, and I wanted to go to that football game, and it was snowing. And I'm like, Mom, I want to go. And she's like, you're not getting in a car or a bus because it's dangerous. But I'm like, but the other kids are doing it. Well, you're not the other kids. And you know what? I said, well, you're not fair. You don't listen to me. You don't understand. That's the same type of reason a child could come up and say the same thing, going, my mother doesn't understand. She doesn't want me to have this vaccination. We don't think really well when we're kids. We just know what we're angry about, and these are our emotions and our feelings. But common sense tends not to come in there, again, at the age about 25. So why, when we're looking, you said about 74% of all kids are vaccinated, instead of taking the rights away from parents for that 25%, why don't we educate and have education for the parents? And just because something is a bill doesn't mean it's a good bill. I could go on and on and on about bills that aren't good. So let's work together and let's look at education. You know what? You're teaching the kids education here, but the parents may not have the education, as you said. We have orientation. Let's bring parents in. Let's talk to them about the questions they may have so that they can make that decision.
So, Assemblymember, I would love to really counter vaccine misinformation, which is a tidal wave of misinformation on social media, on certain news outlets that people are receiving that have really poisoned them against the idea of getting vaccinated or getting their kids back. I would love to do that, and I hope we get there one day, but we're not there now. And the question is, right now, should these teenagers be able to protect their own health? And I think yes. I respect your disagreement on it, different perspective on it, and I thank you for that question.
Today, before I was leaving, I was listening to the radio, and we've got tons of commercials, whether radio or TV, about getting vaccinated. But one thing it did say at the end, which I thought was quite interesting, is it said, please consult with your doctor before getting the vaccination. And this was the CDC, California Department of Public Health announcement. So once again, that's why doctors, your personal family doctor, used to give you the vaccination because they knew what your record was. They knew what your child's record was. Again, you're now putting it in the hands of people that don't understand. And we know, too, allergic reactions. Lots of kids don't even know they have allergic reaction until something actually hits it. And so again, this is not about vaccinations. This is about parental rights. And it's time we have to stop letting the government decide what is right for our children and what's not. I mean, let's talk about education. Let's bring this back to the fold. It's to take that right away from a parent. To me, is just, it's unconstitutional. It's just not right. These are parents that have decided to have children. They sit there, and we know how much care they put into every thought they do, what school they're going to go to, what they're going to learn. This is their health. Their parents have the right to have their health. Your parents took care of your health. They had the right to decide on your health. My parents had the right to decide on my health because they knew what my health was. And again, on the decision or on the comments of my colleague over here, a lot of kids, they don't know what their medical, I didn't know that my parents, had allergies. I didn't know that cancer ran in my family. I didn't know certain things that I, would have known if I had to be asked. And then just one more. If a child is 12 or up, what is the proof that they bring? So I'm going to go to be someone says, listen, I can actually provide vaccinations. What proof do I have? What proof do they ask? Do they say, can I see your ID? Because I don't know how many kids have IDs, and if they don't, it's probably easy enough to get fake IDs, because I know that you can get a lot of different things fake right now. So what are you verifying? And said, all right, this looks good. Yep, you're good to go. So where's the proof of their age?
Again, that's also healthcare providers have to verify various kinds of information, including age, and right now there are ages of consent in California at 12 or 18 or something else.
But what are they using then? What is it that they ask for? Because there's got to be something going, just like when you have to go before something and says, I want to see a legal driver's license or a passport. What is it, that has to be given? What is the child supposed to be handing to that doctor or that person that's going to give the vaccination?
I could ask Dr. Bloomberg to
That'd be great.
the
I appreciate
pediatrician
it.
to briefly,
Thank you.
because he's the one practicing, I'm not.
Thank you very much.
Just
Yeah,
briefly.
thank you. I can speak to what we do in our practice. I can't tell you what everybody else is doing, but in our practice, if a child between 12 and 17 comes to the appointment alone, we've got pictures of them. They're registered in the system. We know who they are. We ask for their birth date, and we ask for at least 2 independent forms of identification to confirm they are who they say they are.
So what 2 forms would a 12-year-old have?
So it could be anything from, it could be birth date, the names of their parents, their phone number, their home address, those sorts of issues.
So it's not proof, it's just information they're giving you.
That's just information.
Right.
These are kids who are known to our system already, so we've got a picture of them in the system too, so we've got their picture also.
But this isn't something that is across the fleas. You said this is something you do, but it's not something that you could say, do all doctors do this? Does everybody that gives this do that?
Yeah, I can't speak to others.
Correct. Okay. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Again, I really hope my colleagues listen and we really think about the rights we're taking away out of the hands of parents. This is important. And let's go back and look at perhaps education. We talk about education, but we need to, if this is what the problem is perhaps they don't understand. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But they also have a right to make decisions for the kids. It is not our place up here. It's not our place up here to decide what you do with your child, what you do with your child. Our job is to listen, and if you listen today, again, it's overwhelming, and I've had overwhelming calls into my office on this issue for the last year and a half. And I hear those voices, and we have to remember, I don't just vote for my district. I vote for each and every one of your districts, and we've heard an array of different comments coming from different areas. So remember that this vote doesn't just affect your district, it affects every single Californian, and that we owe it to them to hear their voices and make good common sense decisions. And to me right now, giving parents the right to take care of their kids and make decisions, especially when it comes to health, that is what's right. Thank you.